Samwell Tarly stood atop the wall, the chill wind whispering against the black cloak around his shoulders, and allowed his gaze to wander across the endless expanse of white. The shifting colors of dusk, pink and orange bleeding into a pale blue, danced over the frosted landscape. In that moment, one might have thought him a statue, immovable, somber, and grave. But behind those calm, watchful eyes, Sam's mind blazed with thought. He was recalling passages in old tomes and quiet conversations in candlelit corners. He was recalling what the realm had lost, what the Night's Watch had once been, and what it now needed to become if mankind were to stand a chance. He was Lord Commander now, though he hardly believed it himself. Every time he repeated the title in his head, Lord Commander Samwell Tarly, he felt a small surge of panic followed swiftly by a spark of resolve. The time for doubt, self-pity, or timidity had passed. He recalled how, as a boy, he'd been relegated to corners and chastised by his father. He remembered how others treated him when he first arrived at Castle Black. The old Sam, he would often tell himself, could not have weathered the responsibilities laid upon him. But that older self was as distant as a dream. Sam had changed. In ways that made him uneasy, in ways that made him proud, and in ways that felt too large to fully comprehend. He was not alone. Not truly. Around him, the brothers of the Night's Watch went about their duties, overshadowed by the cold, the looming threat beyond the wall, and the knowledge that the realm had all but forgotten their existence. They were fewer in number now, a sparse assembly of survivors from one calamity or another, old men whose beards were streaked with ice and fresh recruits who still shivered in the wind like new leaves. There were faces Sam recognized, men who'd fought at his side or had studied with him in the library, and faces he didn't yet know but would one day trust with his life. He thought of Jon Snow, no longer a brother in black, no longer even in the north, if the rumors were correct. Jon had broken his vows for the right reasons, Sam understood that. But Jon's absence carried a faint sting all the same. Once Sam had relied upon Jon's silent strength and leadership as a bulwark against despair. Now the mantle of leadership fell on Sam's shoulders. He found that strange reality both terrifying and strangely comforting. It felt like a testament to how far he had come. On this evening, his vigil ended when the wind grew fiercer, urging him to step down from the parapet. He walked carefully as the ancient stones beneath his feet were slick with frost. Reaching the top of the stairs that spiraled down through the wall, he paused and breathed in the silence. He had asked the men to meet him in the common hall at twilight. This would be no casual gathering. For weeks he had studied, weighed possibilities, and quietly spoken with Maester Aemon's successors in the library. He had listened to men more experienced in war, men who had defended the wall. But an idea had begun to bloom in his mind, something radical, something that no one expected from a man of his gentleness and academic inclination. Sam was planning an offensive early, bold, and filled with risk. He stepped carefully down the stairs, the torch in his hand casting trembling shadows along the ice. At the base, near the archway that led into the main courtyard of Castle Black, he saw a handful of men waiting. All wore the black cloak and boiled leather, all bore the same haunted look Sam had seen in the eyes of many watchers on the wall. One of them was Dolorous Ed, old Ed Tollett, who stood with his arms folded, muttering curses at the weather and at how he'd been roped into this yet again. Another was a seasoned ranger named Bowen Fletch, a man with deep-set eyes that had the wariness of a stray hound. And just behind them, Sam saw a few fresh recruits, young men who had yet to see a White Walker or the terror that prowled in the midnight gloom. Sam forced a small smile and inclined his head. They followed him inside, silent. He could sense their tension, sense their flicker of curiosity. The men thought Sam was a scholar, a steward who'd gained power by chance, a man whose knowledge of warfare was gleaned from ink-stained pages. But many had come to trust him in ways they had not trusted other commanders. He was honest and kind. He did not mock them or revel in wielding authority. And if truth were told, the men saw within him a spark of courage he was slow to see in himself. Hadn't Sam stood against the White Walkers at the fist of the first men? Hadn't he discovered the secret of Dragoglass, how it could kill the others when steel failed? They knew the stories, some likely embellished in their retellings. They called him Slayer, even though he still flushed at the nickname. In the main hall, the old wooden tables were pushed aside, leaving room for the men to gather. The torches along the wall crackled and spat, illuminating the dark rafters above. The hall was cold, and the men's breath bloomed like faint ghosts. Sam removed his gloves and looked around, letting silence drape over them all for a moment. Then he cleared his throat. "My brothers," he began, trying not to show his nerves. "I thank you for coming. I know we've lost many. We've lost too many. We are few and the north is uncertain. Much has changed since the War of the Five Kings. But the threats beyond the wall remain the same, and something more ancient stirs in the far depths of the frost. He paused, scanning their faces. The men eyed him attentively. He knew they expected small measures, defensive steps. A new distribution of watchers atop the wall, an improvement in supply lines, or a call for more men from the southern lords, though Sam wondered if such calls would do much good. The houses of the Seven Kingdoms often had their own concerns. Winter was here, or at least creeping in on silent feet, and alliances were fragile. No, Sam had concluded that the Night's Watch could not afford to simply hide behind its ancient stones. They needed to strike first, carefully and swiftly, using every advantage that cunning and knowledge could buy them. "I've been reading," Sam continued. He felt a small knot of nervousness at the back of his throat. I know, I always do. But there are records locked away in our library. Records of how the Watch once waged war beyond the wall. They were not always merely watchers. They rode forth to cut off threats before they reached our gates. They destroyed warbands of wildlings before they could grow into an army. They established strongholds deep in enemy territory. They kept the darkness from ever breaching this boundary. And I believe we must do something similar soon while we still have men. Ed Tollett lifted an eyebrow. An expedition? In this cold? Sounds delightful. I was just saying yesterday that I missed sleeping on frozen ground with a snowdrift for a pillow. Several men snorted at Ed's typical cynicism, though their expressions remained serious. Sam pressed onward. I am not speaking of a foolhardy attack, but we know the army of the dead threatened to sweep south not so long ago. John, Lord Snow, he tried to rally the realms of men to form alliances. The threat was real then, and though many others have been defeated, we know from all we've studied that the darkness is not gone. Where one White Walker exists, others can be summoned or created. We do not know for certain how many lurk out there or how far they have spread. We cannot simply assume we're safe. He took a breath, the torchlight flickering across his broad face. We have our dragonglass. We have some Valyrian steel. We have fortifications and knowledge. But to simply remain here is, well, it's waiting for doom to creep up on us. I propose an expedition. A well-prepared one, beyond the wall. We will push deeper into the haunted forest, retake a certain outpost that's long been abandoned, and make that our forward base. From there, we will gather intelligence. If we find signs of the others, we will strike quickly. If we find wildling clans hostile to us, we will treat with them or scatter them. The point is to bring the fight to them if we find it necessary. Silence fell across the room, thick as a tundra snowfall. Then Bowen Fletch spoke, voice low, carefully chosen. My Lord Commander, that's a bold plan. The men we have are, well, we are fewer than we once were. You must know that many among us carry wounds, physical or otherwise. We might not be prepared for a full campaign. Sam nodded. I share those concerns, Bowen. But a half-dozen is sometimes enough if guided by cunning. I've spent weeks, months, going through every detail in the library's records. Some accounts speak of small parties of rangers, no more than 20, that wreaked havoc on raiding wildlings, that assassinated war chiefs or destroyed caches of supplies. They did it quietly and returned with minimal losses. Strategy and knowledge can stand in place of sheer numbers, if we're careful. Dolorous Ed sighed. No matter how we plan, the others never did listen to reason. I doubt the whites will make it easy on us. We have dragonglass, Sam said, his voice taking on a slight edge of determination. We must find more and forge more weapons if we can. There's a vein of obsidian rumored to be buried near Hardhome. We lost Hardhome to chaos and tragedy, but the lore suggests it holds secrets. If the army of the dead can be threatened by dragonglass, then obtaining more would be the difference between life and death. We cannot wait for them to come to us. If the darkest stories are even half true, letting them grow in power would be the end of the watch. He let that hang in the air, a grim statement no one tried to refute. Ed turned his gaze to the men surrounding them, measuring their reactions. When none spoke, Sam took another breath. I'll need volunteers. I won't order men to risk their lives on a mission they think doomed. But I believe we have a chance. We can move swiftly and quietly. Our ravens will remain with a rearguard that I'll position in one of the abandoned forts along the wall, so we can keep in contact. To do this, we'll need a new strong point in the haunted forest, muttered one of the rangers. Something not too far from the wall but safe enough to hold? Yes, there's a ruined tower that we might be able to restore. In the old days, they called it Greenwood Keep. According to the records, It was a watchtower built on an outcropping of stone near a bend in the Milkwater. It's close enough to the wall that, if we're in danger, we can signal for reinforcements. But it's far enough that we could host a small force and run scouting parties to Hardhome, or deeper north if needed. If we can repair it and hold it for the winter, it might serve as a foundation for all our future operations. He paused, letting his gaze skim the men again. Some were whispering to one another. He was not sure what they said, but he could sense curiosity, maybe even a hint of eagerness. The Night's Watch, for all the bleakness in its existence, had always attracted men who yearned to prove themselves. Duty was their watchword, but many also relished a chance to stand against the creeping darkness that threatened humankind. "Who will lead these parties, my lord?" asked Bowen Fletch. "Are we to send an expeditionary force of mostly rangers?" Sam hesitated. I will go." He spoke calmly, though he felt his throat tighten at the admission. He knew many might object. The men were used to the Lord Commander remaining at Castle Black, coordinating from within safe walls. But Sam understood that this plan, this entire notion, relied heavily on the specialized knowledge he alone possessed. He knew the lore, the best ways to fight the White Walkers, and how to uncover ancient caches. He also felt in his heart that if he were to send men into danger on his word, he should be willing to face that danger himself. He had gleaned that sense of honor from John's example. Dolorous Ed nearly dropped the cup of ale he'd been nursing. "You, my lord? You're leaving the wall." "Yes," Sam said, steadying himself. "I must see to it personally. With me, I will bring a detachment of rangers, some proven veterans, and a few new recruits. Those who know the wilds will show us safe paths. Those who have knowledge of smithing might assist in forging new weapons on site. I'll also bring a small retinue of stewards to maintain supplies and keep records." A low murmur rippled through the hall. Sam took a moment to study the expressions before him. Some men looked surprised, some impressed, and a few skeptical. He hoped that, in time, they would see the wisdom of the plan. He needed them united. Divisions in the watch could be fatal. He cleared his throat again, projecting his voice. "I won't lie. It's perilous. But the Night's Watch has always sworn to protect the realms of men. If the day ever comes, 7 forbid, that the White Walkers once again gather en masse, we will not be able to rely on the disorganized Southern Lords for immediate help. The realm's conflicts are many. Our best defense is to keep the others from marshaling their forces beyond the wall. I believe this is our duty and our only hope. If you think otherwise, or if fear stays your hand, I do not begrudge you. But I ask for volunteers. Who among you will join me?" Dolorous Ed, by old habit, muttered a complaint even as he stepped forward. "Suppose I always dreamed of dying in a ruin in the frozen forest with White Walkers nibbling on my toes. Might as well volunteer." Bowen Fletch gave a half-smile. "I'll join you, Lord Commander. I have old grudges to settle with the dead. My blade's still sharp, and I aim to keep it that way." One by one, men stepped forth, some eager, some resigned to the inevitable. Sam nodded, trying to keep emotion from his face. He felt both moved and fearful. He would lead them, he must keep them safe, and he must not fail in his objective. The realization weighed heavily on him, but the determination in their eyes also fed a spark of courage within him. He dismissed them soon after, giving instructions on what to prepare: warm clothing, extra rations, dragonglass weaponry, casks of oil for lighting fires. Sam had read that fire could weaken whites and terrify them. He also instructed them to collect building materials and a small forge kit. They would likely have to do repairs on Greenwood Keep if it was as ruined as the old text suggested. Later that night, Sam retreated to his study, a cramped room in the Lord Commander's tower. He sat at a desk strewn with maps and books. Candlelight flickered on the pages. He went through a volume titled A History of the Northern Watchtowers, scanning for references to Greenwood Keep. He found a few, mostly from centuries past, describing how the Rangers sometimes used the site as a forward post against raiding wildlings. The texts mentioned hidden passages, perhaps tunnels carved into the rock, but the details were vague. He pored over them regardless, committing every mention to memory. In a quieter moment, he stared at a small, half-burnt page on which he had written a letter to Gilly. The words were heartfelt, but incomplete. He wanted to tell her everything. His fears, his hopes, the plan that might save them all or doom him to an unmarked grave in the snow. He hadn't found the right words yet. Gilly was in Horn Hill, or perhaps still traveling in the south with the child. He prayed she was safe. If all went well, perhaps one day they would meet again, and Sam could finally rest from the burden of command. But that seemed a distant dream. For now, the realm needed him to be Lord Commander Samwell Tarly, not the gentle boy who hid in the library. He squeezed the quill tight, then slowly set it aside. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow he would try again to finish that letter. The days that followed were a haze of preparations. Men checked and rechecked their supplies, sharpened swords and daggers, tested newly forged arrowheads made of dragonglass. The blacksmith, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, complained of the difficulty in working with obsidian. "It's brittle as sin," he grumbled, "and don't ask me to shape a proper longsword from it. Best you can get are arrowheads, spear tips, maybe a dagger or two if I'm careful." Still, Sam insisted that any feasible dragonglass weapon be made and distributed. By the time the expeditionary force was ready, Sam had mustered about 40 men in total, a mix of veterans and novices. He left behind enough men to hold Castle Black's defenses, entrusting its safety to the experienced officers who could keep the peace and maintain patrols. Ed Tollett, half sarcastic as always, tried to lighten the mood as they assembled in the courtyard. "Well, at least I'll have good company. If the dead rise up, we can pester them with bad jokes until they run away." A few men grinned, though the tension in the air was obvious. On a cold morning beneath a sky of steel-gray clouds, Sam led his force through the great gate at the base of the wall and into the haunted forest. The wind sighed through the ancient pines, and the snow-laden branches creaked in silent protest. Every footstep crunched over ice and snow, and every breath of the men fogged the air around them. Sam rode near the front, perched on a horse borrowed from the watch's meager stable. He wore a fur-lined cloak over his black armor, and at his belt hung a dragonglass dagger along with a short sword of castle-forged steel. He felt heavier than usual, but the adrenaline of finally being in the field coursed through him. He could still scarcely believe that he was leading an armed column beyond the wall. Their journey took several days, each marked by a growing sense of isolation. The sounds of crows cawing, the occasional crack of distant ice, or the rustling of underbrush were the only signs of life. The men set a brisk pace during the daylight hours, though daylight itself was short and pale, the sun never truly shining, as if it hovered behind a cold veil. At night, they made camp in defensible clearings, setting watch rotations that allowed some men a few hours of uneasy sleep. Sam often stayed up longer than he should have, reading by lamplight or chatting with the men, offering them quiet words of assurance he barely believed himself. Early on, they encountered a small wildling camp, 2 men, a woman, and a child huddling around a meager fire. The Rangers approached cautiously, weapons at the ready, but Sam ordered them not to strike unless threatened. Instead, Sam tried to speak with the wildlings. He was no expert in their dialect, but he knew a few words from his time spent among them in years past. The wildlings were wary, especially of a man wearing black, but Sam's gentle tone and offers of food eventually coaxed them into conversation. They shared meager information, rumors of strange shapes roaming the far north, of entire pockets of forest where no animal tracks could be found, of eerie nights where the winds seemed to speak in voices that weren't quite human. Whether such stories were entirely true or tinted by fear, Sam couldn't say, but they added weight to his conviction that an ancient threat persisted. The wildlings also mentioned that Har Home was not as empty as once believed. Some survivors had returned, hoping to scavenge. But rumor had it a strange coldness clung to the place. When asked if they wanted to join the watch or seek refuge south of the wall, the wildlings shook their heads. They would take their chances in the deep forest, they said, as they always had. Sam did not press them. He gave them a small pouch of food and warned them to stay away from certain areas if they valued their lives. There was no sense in forcing them. The watch needed no new enemies, and Sam saw no reason to be cruel. They pressed on, forging a path along old ranger trails. The trees were tall and thick, their trunks covered in frost like white bones. The gloom was oppressive. On the third night, one of the younger stewards, Tim Stone, insisted he heard voices near his tent. He swore he saw a figure standing just beyond the firelight, pale eyes glinting in the darkness. A search of the perimeter found no tracks. Some said he was just anxious, but Sam recognized in the boy's trembling gaze a reflection of his own old terrors. The haunted forest had a way of conjuring shapes from nightmares. Nevertheless, Sam took the report seriously. He ordered an increase in the watch rotations and had the men keep their weapons close. Dolorous Ed muttered something about it all being a big mistake, that the dead preferred to do their haunting well away from meddling men in black cloaks. But despite the gloom, morale held. Sam had the men gather every night for a brief talk. He spoke softly, reminding them of their vow and the importance of why they were here. To his surprise, his words seemed to resonate. Perhaps because they understood Sam was not just their commander, but someone who shared their fears. He felt as though they were forging a brotherhood stronger than the watch had seen in years. Finally, after nearly a fortnight of travel, they arrived at Greenwood Keep. It rose from the forest floor like the skeleton of some ancient creature. The main tower, though partially collapsed, still stood a good 30 feet high. Surrounding it was a broken wall of old timber and stone. Much of the courtyard was overgrown with brambles and saplings that twisted through the ruined masonry. Snow blanketed everything. If there had been a gatehouse, it was now little more than a pile of rotting logs. Sam approached cautiously, half expecting the place to be infested with wild animals or squatters. But all was silent. A portion of the tower's upper levels had caved in, leaving a jagged hole in the wall, and fragments of weathered wood jutted outward like splintered ribs. Sam dismounted. He signaled the men to spread out. They entered the keep's courtyard, boots crunching over snow and debris. The air was still. In the hush, Sam heard a faint dripping noise, meltwater sliding down the stones. The men fanned out, searching. After a half-hour sweep, they found no sign of any living or undead presence. Greenwood Keep was abandoned, left to the winds of winter. "Well," Bowen Fletch said softly, "we have our work cut out for us." They set to clearing out the rubble from the courtyard, cutting away the tangle of vegetation, and making the place at least marginally habitable. Some men rigged temporary barricades where the walls were too crumbled to defend. Others focused on removing fallen beams from the tower's interior. The first night there, the men sheltered in tents pitched within the old walls, protected from the wind by a partial barricade. Sam hardly slept. He walked the perimeter, ensuring the posted guards were awake. The forest loomed beyond, filled with shapes that could have been trees or could have been watchers of another kind. A crescent moon glittered through the shifting clouds, illuminating the keep's battered silhouette. Over the next week, the men worked tirelessly to make Greenwood Keep serviceable. They set up a small smithy in a corner of the courtyard, using portable equipment they'd dragged on sledges. The blacksmith hammered out nails and iron brackets, which they used to reinforce the tower's floors where possible. They built a makeshift stable area for the horses in the portion of the courtyard that was mostly sheltered from the elements. They constructed a rudimentary gate, more of a barricade than a proper gatehouse, but enough to delay any potential attackers. Sam oversaw it all, dividing his time between directing the men and studying the keep's layout. He found a partial staircase leading down into what might be a cellar, though it was blocked by rubble. He wanted to investigate the lower levels eventually in case the rumored tunnels existed. As they worked, Sam considered the next phase of his plan, scouting expeditions. He wanted parties sent out in multiple directions to gather intelligence. The largest priority was Harholm, rumored to hold a potential source of dragonglass, but also a place of tragic history where an undead threat had once overwhelmed thousands. Sam wasn't eager to see if the dead still lurked there, but if they were serious about forging new weapons, they needed every resource possible. He also wanted smaller groups to push deeper, searching for any sign that the others roamed these woods. He summoned his captains, Dolorous Ed, Bowen Fletch, and a few others to the keep's partially restored Great Hall. They stood near the hearth, which they'd managed to clear of debris. A crackling fire provided some measure of warmth, though not enough to banish the chill from their bones. Sam had spread out a rough map on a low table. The forested areas were sketched out vaguely, with a few known landmarks near Harholm, the Milkwater, and beyond. He pointed to Hardholm's location near the eastern coast. "I propose 2 scouting forces," Sam explained, "each about 10 men. One goes northeast to our home. If conditions permit, they assess the possibility of retrieving obsidian. The other moves northwest, deeper into the forest, searching for any trace of wildling camps or signs of undead. Meanwhile, the rest of us remain here to fortify Greenwood Keep and prepare for further incursions. We'll maintain contact via Raven if possible. If either scouting party runs into trouble, they are to send word immediately and we'll try to ride to their aid. Bonefletch nodded, his gaze tracing the map. I'll lead the party to our home if you like, my lord. I know the approach well enough from my earlier ranger days. We might run into rough weather near the coast, but I'll make do. Agreed. Sam turned to Dolores said, Ed, do you think you can manage the Northwest scouting expedition? Ed sighed, rubbing the stubble on his chin. A forest full of potential whites and white walkers, how could I resist? A dream come true. But yes, Lord Commander, I'll do it. Sam managed a small smile. I'll remain here. We need someone coordinating, and if we discover something important in the keep's lower levels, I want to be here to see it. I might send smaller forays if we glean any new leads about dragaglass or caches of supplies. The key is caution. I want no unnecessary risks. The men parted ways the next morning, forging through the winter wilderness. Sam stood at the crumbling walls of Greenwood Keep, watching as they disappeared among the snow-laden trees. He prayed silently for their safety. Then he turned his attention to the tasks at hand. The keep was slowly becoming livable, but the nights were bitter and resources were scarce. The men would need to hunt game, fish in the streams, and ration carefully. Sam delegated tasks to those with skill in tracking and hunting. He spent his own hours exploring the tower's interior, looking for hidden chambers or clues left by those who'd once occupied it centuries before. In one dusty corner of the tower's ground floor, behind a collapsed pile of old beams, Sam discovered something interesting. A rusted iron door set into the stone floor. The lock was ancient, crusted with decades of corrosion. He had a few men help him clear away the debris. With effort, they managed to pry the door open, revealing a steep stairwell descending into darkness. A musty smell drifted up stale air, undisturbed for who knew how long. One of the stewards fetched torches, and Sam carefully led a small group down. The stairs spiraled, carved into old stone, occasionally slick with moisture. At the bottom, they found a small antechamber lined with shelves. Rotting wood, caked with mold, suggested these shelves once held provisions or tools. Beyond was a corridor that branched in two directions. Sam's heart thudded in his chest. This was exactly the sort of hidden passage he'd read about in the keep's ancient records. He ordered the men to proceed slowly. One path led to a collapsed tunnel. The roof had caved in, forming an impassable barrier. The other led to what appeared to be a sealed storeroom. The door, reinforced with bands of iron, was swelled shut. After some effort, they pried it open, though it splitting. Inside, they found a scattering of old supplies, ceramic jars, rotted cloth, a few rusted tools. Most of it was worthless after so many years. But in one corner, Sam found a chest, locked and wrapped in chains. The chain was fragile with age, though, and the lock crumbled under a crowbar's pressure. When they opened the chest, a cloud of dust swirled up, making them cough. Inside, they found a small trove of arrowheads, black as night. Sam's eyes widened, dragonglass. Some looked chipped, but many were intact, enough to supply a substantial number of arrows. He lifted one carefully. The slick black surface glimmered under torchlight. He recalled how these arrowheads could pierce a white walker's body where steel would shatter. Perhaps it wasn't a huge quantity, but it might make a difference in a pitched fight. The men murmured excitedly. Sam placed them back with great care. They carried the chest upstairs, mindful that any accident might shatter the precious obsidian. After that discovery, Sam felt a new surge of hope. Greenwood Keep was proving its worth. The winter nights passed slowly. A biting wind whistled through cracks in the tower walls. Snow drifted high against the keep's perimeter. The men worked hard to shore up defenses, but in their quieter moments, an uneasy dread settled on them. The forest beyond the walls felt poised on the edge of revelation. At times, watchers on the battlements reported seeing dark shapes moving beyond the tree line. A few swore they heard the distant moan of something that wasn't the wind. Sam doubled the guard at night, though they had limited manpower. Sleep was fitful for most. Tom stretched on, and neither of the scouting parties had returned. Sam grew anxious. He tried to reassure the men and himself that no news was good news, that it simply took time to travel and return. But the old nightmares began to creep back into his sleep, images of undead armies closing in, of the wall crumbling, of him failing those who trusted him. He woke in cold sweats, feeling alone despite the men who now called him their leader. Then, one evening near sundown, the watchman sounded an alarm. Sam hurried up the tower steps as fast as his legs could carry him, hard hammering. At the parapet, he found the lookouts staring into the distance. There, the man pointed, voice tight. "I see figures." Sam peered through the gloom. Sure enough, he saw a small group of men approaching. By the black cloaks they wore, it was Dolorous Ed's scouting party. But they seemed reduced in number. Sam counted only 6, and Ed himself half-staggered as he reached the gate. Sam rushed down to meet them while the men at the gate removed the makeshift barricade. Ed's face was drawn, eyes sunken with exhaustion. He had a ragged bandage wrapped around his left forearm, stained with dried blood. The others looked similarly battered, cuts, bruises, broken armor pieces. One ranger, Bannon, was missing. Another was carried by his companions, unconscious or possibly dead. Sam's stomach tightened with dread. "What happened?" Sam asked urgently, beckoning for the men to bring the wounded inside. The rangers guided their injured comrade to a spot near the hearth, calling for a healer. Ed rubbed his pale eyes, voice thick. "We found a wildling camp about 3 days' ride northwest. Or what was left of it. Bodies everywhere, torn apart. Looked fresh, maybe a day old when we arrived. We thought maybe a white attack. But no footprints in the snow, no sign of the dead. Then at night, they came for us." Sam swallowed. "Whites?" Ed shook his head. "Worse. I don't know how many. Could have been just 1 or 2. But they were fast and strong, gliding between the trees like ghosts. Took Bannon's head off before we even saw them. We fought as best we could. Dragon glass blades glowed in the moonlight like they were hungry. I struck one in the shoulder, I think. It shrieked and vanished into the dark. Another stabbed me here." He gestured to his bandaged arm. "The wound is cold, Sam. Burns like ice." Sam felt a chill in his bones. "So, White Walkers?" Ed nodded. I think so. Or something near enough. They didn't come at us with an army of whites behind them. Just themselves. Or maybe they had a small handful of undead we never saw. Hard to tell in the chaos. We managed to drive them off or escape them, I'm not sure which. They seemed to fade into the darkness when our dragaglass came out. We lost a good man, though. And we had to carry poor Crane all the way back. The cold got into him. I don't know if he'll make it." Sam exhaled shakily. "Let's get you all some rest. I'll see what can be done for your wounds." He waved over their meager medical help, a pair of stewards who had some knowledge of herbs and bandaging. Ed's men settled on bedrolls near the fire, weariness etched into every line of their faces. Sam retreated to the tower's 2nd floor. He gripped the stone windowsill, staring at the moonlit courtyard below. This was precisely what he had feared. The others were indeed out there, and they were active. They might be few, or they might have hidden strengths. He recalled old tales. White Walkers had their own cunning. They could create more of their kind if they claimed the living. They preferred to let the cold do much of their work, wearing down foes before striking. The fact that Ed and his men had been attacked so directly was unsettling. He found himself wishing that the southern kingdoms would come to their aid. But they were cut off, far in the wilderness, with only crows to carry messages. And if Sam sent a raven south, who would respond? The lords had their own problems, their own petty wars or fragile alliances. Likely, they would not spare enough men to ensure the Night's Watch could mount a real campaign. That left them to fend for themselves in this bleak environment. In the days that followed, Sam studied every old text he could find about White Walker behavior. He also worked with the men to refine their defenses. They reinforced the gates with sharpened stakes, set up watch stations around the perimeter, and made sure every man carried some form of dragaglass. Meanwhile, Ed recovered slowly, though his arm remained cold to the touch. The steward who tended him said the frost had bitten deep. Crane lingered unconscious, breath shallow. The watchers whispered that he might never wake. A week passed, and there was still no sign of Bowen Fletch's party returning from Har home. Sam's apprehension grew each day. Winter storms battered the keep, limiting visibility. Hunting became more difficult. The men ate stale bread, salted meat, and whatever thin stew the stewards could concoct. Sam worried about morale. The discovery of the White Walkers so near had spooked many. Then, abruptly, on a bitter afternoon when the sky was the color of lead, a raven arrived. Sam heard its raspy caw echo through the tower. One of the black-caped stewards rushed the bird to him. Sam unfurled the small scroll attached to its leg. It was a message from Bowen Fletch, scrawled in hurried script. Lord Commander, Har home stands, but barely. A few survivors eke out in existence. Dragonglass deposits rumored north of the main settlement. We found whites lurking in the old huts along the shore. Killed some, but forced to retreat. We plan another foray with local help. We'll keep you informed. The cold here is unnatural. Dread grows by the day. The note ended there. Sam let out a tense breath. They were alive at least. but Harholm was as dangerous as ever. With White Walkers roaming the forest to the northwest and Whites infesting the eastern ruins, Sam's plan for an early offensive looked more urgent and more treacherous than ever. If they didn't push back now, the threat could grow until it was unstoppable. Sam made a decision. He called a meeting that evening. The men gathered in the Great Hall, now somewhat more hospitable with a consistent fire and cleared rubble. Sam stood before them, feeling every eye upon him. He spoke in a measured voice, tempered by the gravity of recent events. "My brothers, we came here to take the fight to the enemy. We've found that the enemy is indeed lurking beyond the wall, White Walkers and Whites. Bowen's party at Harholm reports a similar threat. We cannot hide behind our walls and wait for them to gather in force. We must press the attack. I plan to lead a contingent to Harholm to assist Bowen Fletch. We will do what we can to clear the area of Whites and secure the Dragoglass deposits. Meanwhile, I want a second contingent to remain here, fortifying Greenwood Keep and keeping watch for any new movements by the others in the northwest. If the White Walkers attempt to approach us again, we must be ready." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I won't sugarcoat it. This is dangerous. We've already lost men. But if we don't act now, while we still have the advantage of surprise, we risk allowing the dead to multiply. We risk dooming the realms of men." Dolores Ed, arm still bandaged, looked up from where he slouched. "I'd volunteer to come with you, my lord, but I doubt my battered arm will do me much good. Might as well have a dead fish strapped to my side." "I need you here anyway, Ed," Sam said. "You know what we're facing in these woods. You can help train the new recruits in how to fight with Dragoglass, how to guard against ambush. If the others return, your experience could save lives." Ed gave a slow nod, a flicker of relief crossing his weary face. Sam turned to the rest. "I'll select 15 men to accompany me eastward in 3 days' time. We'll travel light to move quickly. The rest will remain behind to guard our new outpost. Any questions?" One of the rangers raised a hand. "How will we deal with Whites en masse if we find them in Harholm? The last expedition was forced to retreat." Sam squared his shoulders. "Fire, for one. Also, we'll use the Dragoglass arrowheads and spears we found below. If there are too many, we'll fall back. But we cannot let them fester unchallenged. If, 7 forbid, the dead gather in large numbers, we'll need to destroy them before they become a horde. Our objective is to do as much damage as we can to their numbers and to secure that obsidian. We must remain cunning and not overextend." With that, the men began to talk among themselves. Some expressed fear, others grim resolve. Sam listened to them, answering questions where he could, reassuring them that if they stayed united, they had a chance. He couldn't tell if he entirely believed his own optimism. But he spoke as their leader must, with a veneer of calm that belied the knot of dread in his stomach. Those 3 days of preparation passed in a blur. Men repaired their armor, sharpened blades, and tested newly made Dragoglass weaponry. Sam carefully selected the 15 men he would bring. He wanted a mix of experienced fighters and a few stewards to handle supplies. He also insisted on bringing a new recruit named Jaren, whose uncanny skill with a bow was already talked about among the brothers. They ked dried rations, flasks of oil for setting fires, and extra furs against the cutting wind. When the dawn of departure arrived, the air was biting cold. Snow flurries drifted in lazy spirals. Sam addressed the keep before he left, standing near the courtyard gate. "Take heart, my brothers," he said. "Hold Greenwood Keep. It is ours now. If the gods are kind, we'll return with allies, or at least with the means to vanquish this threat once and for all." He eyed Dolores Ed, who offered him a solemn nod. Ed's eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen too much, but still stood, still fought. Sam mounted his horse, leading the line of 15. They rode out from the gates, leaving behind the newly hoisted banner of the Night's Watch flapping in the cold wind. The forest swallowed them quickly, the path eastward as rough as any they had traveled. Sam thought of Gilly, of how life might have been simpler if he'd remained in Old Town to become a maester. But that path was gone. He was Lord Commander now, the one who had to step forward when others might shrink back. On the second day of their journey east, a storm blew in, battering them with swirling snow and slicing winds that cut through furs and boiled leather. Progress slowed to a crawl. Sam led them to seek shelter in the lee of a rocky outcropping. They built a fire and huddled close. The howling of the wind overshadowed conversation. By the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind knee-deep drifts and a silent, muffled world of white. They pressed on, using the sun's position when they could see it to orient themselves. Sam consulted his map frequently, though the forest's tangled layout often bore little resemblance to the neat sketches on parchment. Animal trails, half hidden under snow, guided them around denser thickets. At night, they set up watch. Each man knew the stories of the White Walker's stealth and dreaded glimpsing that pale, cold visage in the dark. They did see signs of trouble, tracks in the snow that were not animal, leading in strange patterns before disappearing. Once, they came upon a set of footprints circling a tree, as though whoever made them had simply vanished. This put all of them on edge. Sam prayed quietly to the seven, wondering if they cared to listen to a black brother so far north. The men kept their weapons close, and Sam had them practice quickly drawing dragonglass daggers. On the fourth night of travel, they smelled the sea before they saw it. The wind shifted, carrying the briny tang of salt. The terrain sloped downward, the snow giving way to stony ground. By midday, they broke from the forest and beheld the distant coastline. Hardhome lay on a rocky shore, the remains of a settlement battered by the waves. Wooden huts, half collapsed, dotted the shoreline. A crooked palisade wall stood in disrepair, providing little real defense. Smoke curled from a few fires within the settlement. Sam felt a pang of relief. There were at least some living folk there, but the place carried an aura of misery. Clouds hung low, and the wind from the shivering sea was bitter as betrayal. Cautiously, they approached. A handful of rough-clad wildlings emerged to greet them, armed with spears. Their leader was a tall woman with scarred cheeks and wary eyes. She demanded to know their business. Sam raised his hands to show no threat. "We are brothers of the Night's Watch. We come to meet our rangers who preceded us, Bowen Fletch. Do you know him?" The wildling woman regarded Sam's black cloak. Some men in black arrived about a week back. They're in the big hut near the docks." She eyed Sam's group suspiciously, then gestured for them to enter. "No harm if you've come to help. The whites come at night, from the water or from the forest. We've lost enough good folk. More bodies walk each day. The cold grows." Sam and the men rode slowly into Hardhome. The settlement was a pitiful sight. Many huts were collapsed entirely, and everywhere lay the detritus of a once larger population, broken crates, scattered possessions. A handful of children peeked from behind corners, their faces gaunt with hunger. Sam's heart twisted. The wildlings who had returned here must be desperate indeed. The place reeked of rotted fish and decay. They found Bowen Fletch in a longhouse near the remnants of a pier. A small group of black brothers was with him, as well as a handful of wildlings. Bowen greeted Sam with relief etched in his features. "Lord Commander, praise the gods you've come," he murmured, pressing a hand to Sam's shoulder. "It's worse than I feared. The whites prowl these shores at night. We've tried to kill them, but new ones crawl out of the water. And I'm certain we glimpsed a White Walker on that ridge." He gestured to a rocky outcrop looming over the settlement. When dawn broke, it was gone. Sam frowned. "How many men have you lost?" "3 so far. We managed to hold them off with fire and dragonglass, but it's a nightly struggle. As for the obsidian deposit, we believe it's about half a league inland, near a cluster of hot springs. But traveling there and hauling back any significant quantity is dangerous, especially with these attacks. The wildlings have lost even more. They're terrified." Sam looked around at the haggard faces, felt the despair in the air. Yet he also sensed a flicker of possibility. They had come prepared with additional men, supplies, and more knowledge. Perhaps they could organize a systematic defense, push back the undead, and secure the obsidian. "We'll help fortify this place," he said firmly. "We'll set up watch rotations, put dragonglass in the hands of every able fighter, and burn any white we see. Then we'll plan an expedition to that deposit. We must do this quickly, or we risk being overwhelmed." The following days tested their resolve. Sam and Bowen coordinated with the wildlings, establishing lookouts along the shore. The men hammered together crude barricades using driftwood and scraps of lumber. They took shifts patrolling the perimeter. Each night, the whites came shambling figures with tattered flesh, stumbling out of the frigid sea or creeping among the rocks. The watchers would raise the alarm, and men with torches and dragonglass weapons scrambled to repel them. Often, the whites were destroyed, but each encounter claimed a victim or two, men dragged away screaming or torn open by clawed hands. Their remains had to be burned at once, lest they rise again. Sam fought, too, though terror made his hands shake. He remembered how to stab with a dragonglass dagger, aiming for the chest or the neck. He forced himself to do what needed doing, no matter how much his stomach churned. One night, a slender figure wreathed in frost-blue light appeared near the edge of the settlement. A white walker, tall and silent, watched as a squad of black brothers and wildlings fought off a pack of whites. The walker held a spear of ice, its eyes glowing like cold stars. Before Sam could muster a band to engage, it vanished into a swirl of snow, leaving only footprints that gleamed with hoarfrost. Sam couldn't sleep that night. The presence of that ancient evil was almost tangible, pressing on his mind like a weight. Yet he steeled himself. They had come for a reason. By day, they advanced inland to locate the obsidian deposit. A handful of watchers stayed behind to guard the settlement while Sam, Bowen, and a band of 10 others, including some wildlings, followed the path to the hot springs. The land rose into gentle hills, steam rising from pools where thermal heat still bubbled. Sure enough, in the rocky soil near these pools, they found veins of obsidian, hard black stone that glittered in the winter sun. Sam knelt, picking up a chunk in awe. This could be the difference between victory and annihilation. He snapped off a piece and recognized the telltale sheen. Yes, dragonglass in abundance if they could mine it. Mining was not easy in the cold. They had rudimentary tools, but the labor was slow, the threat of white attacks ever present. Sam instructed men to stand watch while others tried to chip away at the stone. They loaded the obsidian into sacks, returning to Har home before nightfall to avoid being caught out in the open. Each day, they made more trips, risking ambush as they gathered enough to arm many hands. The wildlings proved surprisingly helpful once they saw the tangible benefit. They had lost too many to the dead. If forging a few daggers or arrowheads could save them, they were eager. Still, the white attacks persisted. Men died. Sam made the difficult decision to burn the bodies of the fallen at once, praying for their souls as the flames consumed the flesh. He might never grow accustomed to the stench, the horror of seeing comrades devoured or dismembered. But he buried his sorrow under the mantle of command. He had to keep them fighting. He had to keep them believing in a chance of survival. After about a fortnight, they had a growing stockpile of unshaped obsidian plus the knowledge of how to forge it into arrowheads, spear tips, and small blades. Sam believed it was time to take a bolder stand. If the White Walkers lurked nearby, controlling these whites, perhaps they could be drawn into an ambush. He discussed the idea with Bowen and a wildling leader named Carla, the same woman who had greeted him at Hardhome's entrance. Sam proposed a trap, set bait, perhaps in the form of a small group traveling beyond the settlement to lure the White Walker or its whites into an area rigged with fire traps and a ring of fighters armed with obsidian. It was dangerous, but if they could kill or at least wound the White Walker, the whites might lose direction or be severely weakened. Carla spat on the ground. Risky. We'd need a place we can funnel them into. And men who won't lose their nerves. Bowen shrugged. We've lost a dozen men already. A few more for a chance to kill the fiend behind it all might be worth it. Sam knew it was a grim calculus, but he could not see a better alternative. Sitting in Har home waiting to be whittled away by nightly attacks was a slow form of suicide. He said, we'll set the trap tomorrow evening. We'll send out a wagon, appear to carry supplies for the mines. We'll keep it lightly guarded so the White Walker might see it as easy prey. Meanwhile, we'll hide men in the rocks along the path with flaming pitch and obsidian. If it takes the bait. That night, Sam felt a mixture of dread and determination. The plan was set in motion at dusk. The air was unnaturally still, a hush that spoke of impending violence. A small group of volunteers, 2 wildlings, 1 black brother, drove the wagon along a path through a rocky defile near the hot springs. The rest of the ambush party took positions among the boulders, cloaked in darkness, flasks of oil and obsidian weapons at the ready. Sam crouched behind a jagged outcrop, heart-pounding. A wildling next to him clutched a dragonglass-dipped spear. Bowen was stationed further up the slope, with archers prepared to unleash a volley of flaming arrows. The night deepened. The eerie glow of the moon lit the rocks. The wagon rattled, the volunteers making a show of vulnerability. For a time, nothing happened. Then, a faint scraping noise echoed in the dark. Sam tensed. A shape emerged from the gloom, a white, skeletal arms reaching out with a silent moan. Another followed, then more. The men in the wagon feigned panic, halting the horses. Then they heard it, a crunch of ice, the swirl of a cold wind. A tall figure loomed behind the whites, eyes glowing like pale fire, and other. It moved with the fluid grace of a predatory cat gripping a spear made of crystalline ice. The hush of its presence seemed to suck the warmth from the air. Sam signaled with a small wave. The archers let loose. Flaming arrows streaked through the dark, setting the ground ablaze around the whites, cutting off their escape. The plan was to corral them in the center of the defile. The whites shrieked and flailed as the flames danced. Some collapsed, igniting in a burst of sparks. The White Walker hissed, stepping lightly through the flames. Sam and the others rose from cover, brandishing obsidian blades, spears, daggers. Fear clawed at Sam's belly, but he remembered what was at stake. Now, he roared and the men rushed forward. A shower of oil poured from above, courtesy of other watchers perched on the rocks. Fire ignited, roaring up around the White Walker. It shrank back, momentarily disoriented. One of the wildlings lunged with a dragonglass spear, but the walker pivoted with inhuman speed, shattering the spear with its ice weapon, then impaling the wildling through the throat. The man died instantly, his body frost-kissed as he fell. Sam saw the White Walker's spear glimmer with lethal beauty. The whites, partially pinned by the flames, clawed at the edges, trying to reach the living. Bowen bellowed an order, and archers launched another volley. The White Walker batted aside an arrow with unnerving agility, but a second arrow grazed its flank. A faint wisp of steam rose, and the walker let out a sound like cracking ice. Sam seized the moment. Along with 3 others, he rushed in. One of the men flung a net specially woven with bits of obsidian shards embedded. The net tangled around the walker's spear, momentarily slowing its movements. Sam, heart-pounding, stabbed forward with a dragonglass dagger aimed at the creature's torso. The walker twisted, graceful as a dancer, partially evading the strike. Sam's blade glanced off its icy armor with a squeal that reverberated in his ears. A jolt ran up his arm, nearly knocking the dagger from his hand. Another brother swung a dragonglass axe from the side, catching the walker's left arm. A spiderweb of cracks spread where the blade struck. The creature shrieked, a high, keening wail that echoed in the narrow defile. Sam pressed in again, jabbing at the cracks. The White Walker flung out an arm, knocking Sam flat. Pain jolted through Sam's back as he slammed into the icy ground. Before the walker could finish him, flaming pitch rained down from above once more, forcing it to step away. Sam gasped, rolling to the side, trying to regain his footing. The net was still tangling the walker's movements. Another ranger, Oren, took advantage, driving a dragonglass spear into the crack in its icy chest. The walker howled, a sound that made Sam's teeth ache. A flash of blinding blue-white light erupted along the spear's length. Then the creature shattered like fragile glass, bursting into shards that melted into pale mist as they struck the ground. A tangible wave of cold washed over them, and then it was gone. The whites that remained seemed to flail, collapsing as if their animating force had been severed. Some still twitched, but they were easily dispatched by men with flaming torches or obsidian weapons. Silence fell. The acrid smell of smoke and burning flesh filled the night air. Sam got to his knees, adrenaline surging, trying to catch his breath. They had done it, they had killed a White Walker. The men stood in stunned disbelief, exhaustion etched on every face. With the walker destroyed, a tangible shift occurred. The nightly attacks on Hardhome receded. They still saw stray whites, but the organized assaults lessened. It was as though a puppeteer had dropped the strings. Over the next week, Sam and his men redoubled their efforts to mine and forge obsidian weapons. With the terror somewhat abated, more wildlings joined the cause, seeing hope of reclaiming some measure of safety in their own land. Eventually, with a surplus of dragonglass, Sam decided it was time to return to Greenwood Keep. They had established a fragile alliance with the wildlings at Hardhome, armed them with knowledge and some weaponry to guard against any further undead threats. Bowen Fletch remained behind with a small contingent, determined to keep the area secure. He pledged to send ravens with any developments. The rest, led by Sam, made the arduous journey back. Their losses weighed heavily on them. Each man could name a friend or comrade left behind, whether in shallow graves or in funeral pyres. But there was also a subdued sense of accomplishment. When Sam and his group rode through the gates of Greenwood Keep, the men who greeted them were astonished at the Hall of Obsidian. Dolorous Ed even managed a faint grin. "Never thought lumps of black rock could look so pretty," he said, eyeing the sacks. Ed's arm had healed somewhat, and though he grimaced when he moved, he insisted on helping unload. Sam soon learned that the keep had not been idle. Ed and the others had spotted a few White Walkers prowling the edges of the forest, but had managed to drive them off with watchful vigilance and a barrage of dragonglass arrows. They'd also further fortified the walls and discovered more hidden passages under the tower that stored some ancient supplies. Mostly rotted away, but a few old metal implements were salvaged. Once more, Sam stood at the ramparts, gazing over the snowy expanse. He felt older, weary, and tempered by battle. But he also felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Night's Watch was not just surviving. It was doing something. They had established an outpost beyond the wall, coordinated with wildlings, fought White Walkers, and succeeded in at least one engagement. They still had no illusions that the threat was gone. Such an ancient, malevolent force might only be sleeping until it gathered strength. But Sam had proven that men armed with knowledge, dragonglass, and unity could stand a chance. He sent ravens back to Castle Black, summarizing their victories and losses, hoping the Southern Realm might heed the warning that pockets of the undead remained. Whether that message would spur them to action, Sam could not know. He could only do his duty, as so many generations of Black brothers had done before. They had a foothold now, a place from which to carry the fight forward. With Harholm somewhat stabilized and Greenwood Keep fortified, they had begun a new chapter of the Night's Watch, one that did not merely wait on the wall but ventured out to defend mankind. As the weeks passed into months, Sam organized further patrols, forging alliances with smaller wildling groups, coordinating with Bow and Fletch for the shipping of obsidian. He also found the time to delve deeper into the lore hidden in Greenwood Keep and Castle Black's libraries, searching for any ancient secrets that might tip the balance permanently in humanity's favor. In quiet moments, he finished that letter to Gilly, though he had no idea if it would ever reach her. He wrote of hope amid the dark, of improbable victories, of knowledge that burned bright as any fire. He wrote of how fear could be harnessed, how it could be turned into strength when one fought for those who could not defend themselves. Then he dispatched the letter southward with a raven, trusting the winds of fate to carry it. The men of the watch took to calling Sam the Scholar Commander, or Sam the Bold, in jest. They teased him for his unathletic physique and occasional stutter, but they respected him deeply for his heart and mind. Many had seen him face a White Walker without fleeing, had witnessed his compassion for wildlings and Black brothers alike. They knew he was no typical Lord Commander. Standing on the battlements at Greenwood Keep late one afternoon, Sam gazed at the horizon and allowed himself a rare moment of solace. The sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the snow. Ed joined him, grumbling about the cold, about the unappetizing stew that awaited them, about everything and nothing. Sam smiled, feeling a strange warmth in his chest that had little to do with the setting sun. The Night's Watch had always been an order perched on the edge of despair, but now it felt like they were on the edge of possibility. They had done the unthinkable, launched an early offensive against the White Walkers. And they were still standing. There would be more battles to come, Sam knew. More nights of terror, more grim dawns. But the men of the Night's Watch would be ready. Armed with old knowledge and new courage, they had cast off the passivity of centuries. No longer would they merely wait for winter's doom to march south. They would meet it head-on, guided by the scholar who had once been mocked as a coward. Samwell Tarly, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, stared into that horizon and braced himself for whatever horrors tomorrow might bring. He had found his courage in the oldest tomes and the simplest acts of kindness. He would not lose it now. If the White Walkers rose in force, if all the nightmares of the long night threatened to devour them, the Black Brothers would answer with fire, obsidian, and unyielding resolve. For this was the vow, to guard the realms of men. Sam intended to keep it no matter the cost. And in that fragile, embattled keep beyond the wall, a flame of hope flickered bright in the icy dark. Samwell Tarly woke before dawn, heart pounding and breath puffing out in tiny clouds of vapor. He had dreamed again of the White Walker they had fought, the one that shattered in a burst of ice and dying light. In the dream, it did not die. Instead, it seized him by the throat with a hand of frost, its cold eyes flaring with triumph. Sam jolted awake, feeling phantom fingers still clutching him. By the time he pushed aside his blankets, the dream had dissipated into the silent gloom of Greenwood Keep's tower chamber. Still, it left him coated in sweat despite the chill. He dressed quickly, layering tunic, boiled leather, and a thick black cloak, and he descended the spiral stair with a torch in hand. He emerged into the courtyard to find a few of his Night's Watch brothers stirring, stamping their feet against the cold, checking the sky's color. The horizon was a faint gray, backlit by a hidden sun. The wind made the old timbers creak. Only a fortnight had passed since his return from Harholm, but it felt like months. Each day teemed with fresh challenges, and it seemed they had only begun to chip away at the dangers skulking beyond the wall. The old Sam might have cowered, but the new Sam, Lord Commander Tarly, carried on out of necessity. Too many people depended on him now. He greeted one of the watchers, Hob, a lean ranger with a patchy beard, and then proceeded across the courtyard to check the ramparts. The keep's walls were still partially in ruins in some sections, but enough had been bolstered with fresh timbers and rubble that Greenwood Keep was no longer simply an abandoned relic. Brothers on watch duty saluted as Sam approached, and he gave them each a nod. He took a few moments to look over the forest that encircled them. Beneath the sullen sky, the pines looked black, the snow at their roots a dull gray. No fresh footprints marred the stretch of snow outside the walls. So far, no more White Walkers had dared to assault this place. Perhaps the death of one of their kind had made them cautious. Perhaps they were scattered, unorganized in the aftermath. But Sam had read enough to suspect that cunning, not fear, guided the others. They would be waiting, learning, and testing the watchmen for weaknesses. He turned at a familiar footstep to see Dolorous Ed approaching. Ed's arm was still bandaged, and though he hid it, Sam suspected the wound ached fiercely in this cold. Ed rubbed the back of his neck and squinted at Sam. "Up early again, my lord? Thought you might be giving yourself a chance to snore a bit. Not that you snore. But if you did, I wouldn't blame you." Sam mustered a small smile. "Too many thoughts," he said, pulling his cloak tighter. "I was going to check on our supply wagons and see if the blacksmith needs anything. But first, I wanted to see if the night was calm." Ed tipped his head at the quiet forest. "Calm so far." The men claimed they heard a lone wolf howling. "I told them it was probably my stomach. Breakfast can't come soon enough." They started walking the parapet together. The planks underfoot were still stiff with ice in places, requiring cautious steps. Sam let the conversation turn to mundane matters, how the repairs were progressing, how many men were well enough to resume patrols, whether the Ravens had arrived from Castle Black with any news. But always, at the back of his mind, lurked a gnawing unease. They had cut off a limb of the enemy, but not the head. Winter's war was only beginning. When they descended to the yard again, the men had started stirring fires in the brazier to heat water for morning stew. One of the stewards gave Sam a respectful bow and offered him a bowl of oats. Sam accepted it, though he felt little appetite. He forced himself to eat. The men took their cues from him. If he ate, they ate. If he succumbed to worry, they might crumble. So he savored a few spoonfuls, thanked the steward, and pressed on. The keep's library of sorts was now housed in one of the tower rooms. It was small, a mere handful of volumes discovered in the hidden tunnels and storerooms beneath Greenwood Keep, plus some Sam had brought from Castle Black. Still, Sam spent any spare moment poring over them, searching for insights into the mysteries of the others, any hint of how to permanently banish them from the living world. With Ed heading off to check the perimeter, Sam climbed the tower steps carrying his half-finished bowl of oats. He found the door to the library ajar, candlelight flickering within. Inside, he saw a scrawny steward named Daniel, a lad of perhaps 17 with wide eyes and an earnest demeanor. Daniel had a habit of rising early to read. He glanced up, startled. "My Lord Commander," he said, nearly knocking over a stack of scrolls as he scrambled to stand. "It's all right, Daniel." "Sit," Sam said, entering carefully. The room was cramped, a single window letting in the weak morning light. Shelves built of hastily nailed planks lined the walls, bearing battered tomes. Daniel settled back onto a stool, looking at Sam expectantly. "What are you reading?" Sam asked, setting his bowl aside. "A treatise on the long night," Daniel said. "One that mentions something about binding runes. It's half-legible, some lines are water-damaged, but it speaks of wards that men carved into weirwood trees to repel the dead. Or so it claims. I can't tell if it's fable or fact." Sam's brow furrowed. "Let me see." Daniel turned the book toward him. The writing was in a cramped style reminiscent of old Maester Thomax's script, though many pages were indeed smudged or torn. Sam recognized references to ancient runic languages older even than the first men. He traced a finger over a phrase that claimed a weirwood marked with special sigils could repel whites or disrupt the White Walker's sorcery. Was that lore or mere legend? The text offered no certainty. "Keep it," Sam told Daniel. "If there's anything in there that might help us, we can't afford to dismiss it. Even if it's only partially true, it could provide a clue." He paused, studying the lad. "Make sure you copy any relevant passages onto fresh parchment so we don't lose them." Daniel nodded eagerly, returning to his reading. Sam left him and checked the other shelves, scanning for any volume he had not thoroughly examined. The library was small, but more might surface from the hidden storerooms below as the men continued clearing debris. Eventually, Sam took one battered tome and settled on a bench. He found the silent focus oddly soothing. The words blurred, though, as he remembered Hardhome's nightly battles. The whites rising from the sea. The White Walker on the ridge vanishing in moonlit gloom. He had to remind himself they had won a reprieve. They had proven that men armed with dragaglass and cunning could triumph. But what if 100 White Walkers appeared? 1,000? The thought made his skin crawl. A soft knock at the doorframe interrupted him. A ranger, thick-chested and wearing a battered helm, appeared. "Lord Commander, the men await you in the courtyard for the patrol briefing," he said. "Yes, of course," Sam replied, rising and setting the tome back on the shelf. Daniel gave him a small, encouraging smile as he departed. Sam descended again. In the courtyard, a group of about 30 men stood in formation, some holding spears with dragonglass tips, others with swords at their belts or bows slung across their backs. They were the day's patrol units, men who would circle Greenwood Keep in search of tracks, deliver messages to any nearby wildling settlements, and ensure that no new threat crept up unseen. Dolores Ed stood near them, posture slouched but eyes alert. When Sam appeared, the men straightened slightly. "Good morning, brothers," Sam said, projecting a calm confidence he didn't entirely feel. He had learned from Jon Snow that even a gentle leader must appear resolute. "Our mission remains the same. We guard this keep and its surroundings. If you find evidence of whites or White Walkers, do not engage alone, signal with your horns, fall back, and regroup. We have no reason to split up unless absolutely necessary. Stay in teams of at least 4. This forest can be treacherous in winter with hidden ravines and snowdrifts. Take care." He nodded to Ed, who stepped forward to give them final instructions about the routes. Once that was settled, the patrols departed, the crunch of snow and the shuffle of hooves echoing softly. Sam watched them go. He always felt a twinge of worry sending men beyond the walls. But the watch existed for that very purpose, to keep vigil even in the darkest corners of the realm. Some of the others remained in the courtyard, beginning their tasks for the day, repairing gear, cooking breakfast, or tending to the horses. Sam exhaled, noticing an ache in his back from where the White Walker had thrown him. He doubted it would ever fully fade. Yet that ache also reminded him of how fragile these inhuman foes really were once struck with obsidian. He clung to that sliver of hope. He busied himself with the keep's daily matters, conferring with the steward who managed rations, checking on the blacksmith's progress forging obsidian arrowheads, and listening patiently to a dispute between 2 watchmen over a borrowed knife. By midday, he was more than ready to steal a moment's respite, so he climbed once more to the ramparts to eat a bit of bread and salt fish in the cold air. As he ate, he surveyed the land beyond, half expecting to see a line of whites shuffling toward them. Nothing. Only the hush of winter. But then a speck in the sky caught his attention, a raven gliding on dark wings. It circled once, then dove. Sam hurried down the stairs toward the rookery, heart racing with anticipation. The bird might bear tidings from Castle Black or Har Home. With each passing day, Sam yearned for news, confirmations that men still held the line, that the rest of the realm had not collapsed into chaos, or at least some clue that the threat beyond the wall was receding rather than growing. He reached the rookery, a small enclosure at the eastern corner of the keep. One of the stewards, Baron, was already coaxing the raven onto his glove, offering it a morsel. The black bird cawed, twitching its head. Baron carefully untied the message tube from its leg and handed it to Sam. Sam unrolled the small parchment. The writing was in a slightly shaky hand, as though penned in haste. He recognized the signature, Bowen Fletch at Har Home. Sam read silently. "Lord Commander, the nights remain tense. No large-scale attacks, though whites still wander the shore. We've begun burning the dead on sight. The wildlings remain cooperative for the most part, though there's infighting among their clans. We continue to forge obsidian arrowheads and spears. We're building new barricades. However, rumors have reached us of a gathering of free folk further north, strange folk, they say, deeper in the frozen shore. Possibly a clan that worships some old powers. Some men claim these worshippers speak with the voices of the dead. Not sure I believe it, but the wildlings are rattled. We've also had sightings of a large beast in the sea. Could be a white whale or some horror from the depths. Locals speak of an unnatural presence swirling around Hardhome's waters. I'm not certain what to make of it, but morale suffers. If you can spare men or have advice, we could use both. The White Walkers themselves have not returned in force, but I fear they're only biding time. Bowen." Sam finished reading, a furrow growing in his brow. The letter raised worrying possibilities, a group of free folk who might dabble in dark magic, or at least superstitions that unsettled the wildlings. And a monstrous shape in the sea? Sam shivered at the idea of whites prowling underwater. It was not inconceivable. The army of the dead feared little. If they could animate wolves and bears, why not sea creatures? He tucked the parchment away and turned to Baron. "Send a raven back," Sam said. "I'll compose the response in my chambers. And let the men know we may need volunteers for another expedition soon. Har Home is stable for now, but signs are worrying." Baron nodded. Sam patted the man on the shoulder, thanked him for his diligence, and went off to find quill and ink. On his way, he encountered Ed stepping in from the courtyard, stamping snow from his boots. "We've word from Har home," Sam said. "Bowen's worried about rumors of a strange clan further north." Ed grimaced. "I thought the free folk up that way were scarce. Too cold, too desolate. Unless these are ones who embrace that bleakness. Worshipping old powers, you say?" "Yes. Possibly nonsense, but if the wildlings are frightened, it could lead to panic. And apparently there's something in the sea, too. Or so they claim. A white whale? A sea monster? Hard to know. But it keeps them on edge." "Lovely. As if we needed more monsters," Ed said with a typical wry twist. "I suppose you'll want to send a party to investigate." Sam sighed. "We might have to. If they're cultists of some sort, they could be dealing with forces they don't understand. Or if they're in league with the others, well, we can't allow that to fester." "Well, I'm not going anywhere with this arm," Ed said, tapping his bandaged forearm. "But if you want me to manage the keep, I'll do it. Better me than an eager recruit who can't tell a foot soldier from a stable boy." Sam nodded. "You're the natural choice to maintain order here if I leave. But I won't go anywhere until we assess how many men we can spare. For now, I'll write Bowen, telling him to keep calm, keep forging, keep building barricades, and to gather more intelligence on these rumored worshippers. We can't chase shadows." Leaving Ed with a curt nod, Sam made his way to his small desk in the Lord Commander's tower. He sat and carefully penned a response, urging Bowen to stand firm, to lean on the wildling leader Carla for local knowledge, and to keep Sam updated on any changes. Then he urged caution regarding the rumored clan in the north, requesting more precise location details before any confrontation. Finally, he offered what little encouragement he could, reminding Bowen that they had beaten back the dead before. When he finished, he folded the parchment and dripped a bit of candle wax to seal it. He carried it back to the rookery, tied it to a raven's leg, and watched the bird flutter into the sky. He could only hope the message reached Har home swiftly and that events would not escalate in the interim. Duty, he reminded himself, turning back to the tasks at hand. Days bled into nights. The winter winds intensified, blowing in from the far north. Drifts formed around Greenwood Keep, forcing the men to shovel paths just to move between the tower and the gates. The patrols reported scattered signs of living free folk, many in small, nomadic bands trying to survive by hunting. Some were friendly, or at least neutral, others fled at the sight of black cloaks. The watchers kept an eye out for any indication that the White Walkers were massing. Aside from a few fleeting glimpses of pale shapes near the horizon, all remained quiet. In the hush of that uneasy peace, Sam focused on building up their resources. He oversaw the forging of more obsidian arrowheads, the repair of the walls, and the training of newer recruits in the use of dragonglass. They practiced daily, thrusting with spears or firing arrows at straw targets. Sam believed that repetition might help them respond with calm efficiency if the dead attacked again. It was a far cry from the older days of the Watch, when recruits learned a few fundamentals and then spent long idle hours. Here, beyond the wall, discipline could be the difference between life and an undead afterlife. Meanwhile, Dolorous Ed ensured that the men kept their spirits from sinking into despair. His sardonic humor often brought a crooked smile to their lips, even if it was laced with gloom. "I always said the afterlife would be cold and full of terrors," he once muttered around the campfire, "and here we are living it. Saves the gods the trouble of smiting us later." A full moon rose one night, painting the snow silver. Sam, who had difficulty sleeping, went to the ramparts and found Ed there, peering out into the forest. The moonlight revealed every branch, every patch of ice in stark relief. "What are you looking for?" Sam asked quietly. Ed shrugged. "Maybe a sign that we're winning. Maybe a sign that we're not. See that shape? Over there, near the tall pine? Could be a shadow, could be a white. Hard to tell." Sam peered and saw only a faint silhouette that might have been a trunk leaning at an odd angle. He let out a slow breath. "We can't stay on edge forever, Ed. It'll break us." "Better to be on edge than complacent," Ed replied. "But you're right. The men need hope. Any chance Gilly wrote you back from the south? Perhaps with news of reinforcements?" Sam shook his head. "No word. Ravens might have been lost to storms or simply never reached her. That's the risk of winter traveling. And even if she's well, the idea that my father or any southern lord will send large numbers of men to reinforce us seems remote. The 7 kingdoms are fractured. If they ever unify, it might be too late. We have only ourselves to rely on." Ed nodded, the lines on his face deepening in the moonlight. "Then we'll make do. Just wish we had more of us to go around. This keep is big enough now to hold our garrison, but not so large that we can repulse a serious siege. If the others come in force, We'll face them with fire and dragaglass, Sam said, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. We've done it before. A rare hint of a smile touched Ed's mouth. Aye, we have. He turned his gaze back to the forest. Anyway, I'll keep watch a while longer. You get some rest. Sam wanted to protest, knowing Ed's arm still pained him, but the man's eyes were resolute. Sam nodded, thanked him, and retreated to his chamber, though he was not certain how much rest he would find. Within the next few days, more patrols returned. Some spoke of glimpsing a distant figure clothed in pale rags wandering through the snow without leaving footprints. Another patrol found a cluster of fresh corpses in a clearing, wildlings slaughtered without weapons. Their throats had been ripped out as though by an animal. But tracks were scant. Sam suspected a white bear or wolf might be roaming. The men burned the bodies, returning to Greenwood Keep shaken. Their dread mingled with a slow burn of anger. The White Walkers were out there, picking away at the edges of humanity, sowing terror. Sam felt the tension among his brothers. They wanted to strike out, to do something. Yet plunging blindly into the forests after ghosts would only invite disaster. So Sam maintained caution, ordering the men to hold, to keep vigilant while they continued to fortify and gather intelligence. That intel soon arrived, though not in the manner Sam expected. It was midday when a sentry spotted a column of figures approaching from the northwest. The alarm was raised, men scrambling to the walls, bows at the ready. The shapes emerged from the tree-line, wildlings, perhaps 50 or more, trudging through snow. They bore makeshift spears, hides, and ragged cloaks. Many looked thin, as though they had traveled far on little food. Leading them was a woman with stark white hair braided around her head. She raised an empty hand to show she meant no immediate harm. Sam conferred with Ed on the ramparts. They both squinted down at the newcomers. Could be a trick, Ed muttered. Or they might genuinely need help. Some of them look half dead from hunger. We should let them speak, Sam decided. Open the gate, but keep archers at the walls. If they rush us, we can close the gate and fire from above. Ed relayed the order, and the men maneuvered the barricade aside. Sam descended to the courtyard. He stood with 10 of his best-armed rangers behind him as the wildlings were allowed inside, though only a small group of them actually entered. The rest waited outside, presumably uncertain or following their leader's cue. The woman at the front stepped forward. Her face was weathered, lined with age and hardship, but there was a fierce intelligence in her eyes. She glanced at Sam's black cloak and said in a raspy voice, "You're the commander here?" "Yes," Sam said, measuring his tone. "Lord Commander Samwell Tarley of the Night's Watch." "Who are you, and what brings you to Greenwood Keep?" She offered no name at first, only a tilt of her chin. "We've heard tales of a place where crows and free folk stand together against the dead. Tales from wandering survivors. We've come to see if the tales are true and if you'll grant us shelter." Sam exchanged a glance with Ed, who was standing a step behind him. A hush fell. There were not many ways to respond, let them in or turn them away. Sam had once told Jon Snow that they should help the wildlings, that the real war was with the dead, not the living. He believed that still. But trust needed forging. "We have little in the way of food or luxury," Sam said carefully. "But if you pledge not to raise weapons against us or cause trouble, we won't turn you away to die in the cold. Many free folk have joined us in fighting the White Walkers. We share a common enemy." She appraised him, the lines of her face softening slightly. "I am Malra. My people are the Pine Benders. We've roamed these woods for generations. The dead have been relentless this winter. We've lost too many. Will you let us pass within your walls?" Sam nodded. "In part, yes. Though you must surrender your weapons until we trust you." He saw her jaw clench, but she gave a curt nod. The watchers collected spears and axes from the Pine Benders as they filed inside. Sam directed the stewards to offer them hot stew. The courtyard became a flurry of activity as the new arrivals found corners to huddle, grateful for even minimal shelter from the wind. Malra stepped aside with Sam to speak more privately. Ed and another ranger hovered near enough to intervene if needed. "Your men have fought the others?" she asked, voice low. "We have," Sam said. "At our home and here. We have discovered that dragaglass can kill White Walkers. Fire can destroy whites. We're teaching others how to fight them." She listened intently, a slight tremor crossing her features. "My people have always lived with fear of the white shadows, but never have we seen them so active. They move through the woods, taking more and more of our kin. We flee, yet we find only more death in every direction. Your keep might be our only chance." Sam frowned, mind churning with the implications. The Pine Benders were one of the older free folk clans. If they were effectively driven from their own territory, the enemy's reach might be spreading. You're welcome here, Maura, but know this. Greenwood Keep will stand or fall depending on the discipline of those within its walls. You and your people must follow our rules. We cannot afford chaos. She angled her head in something like agreement. We have no desire to fight you. If we wanted the blood of crows, we'd have tried to take it already. Sam believed her, at least for now. Maura's clan looked exhausted, hardly in any state to fight. He had them settled into an unused storeroom on the ground level of the tower, giving them some straw pallets and blankets. In exchange, they offered to help with repairs and hunting. A sense of guarded relief spread among the new arrivals, though many of the Night's Watch men eyed them warily. Later that day, Sam found Maura in the courtyard, warming her hands over a fire. He noticed she wore a necklace of carved bone talismans. Maura, he said quietly, I'd like to speak with you more about what you've seen in the forest. Anything that might help us prepare. She nodded, gesturing for him to sit on a log near the fire. Ed hovered nearby, as watchful as ever. Maura took a moment as though gathering her thoughts, then spoke in a measured tone. There are rumors among the free folk of a new power stirring. Some say it's an offshoot of the Thens. Others claim it's a clan older than any living memory. They dwell near ice caves far to the north, beyond even the Frostfangs. My people never ventured that far. Too cold, too perilous. But in the past moons, we've heard whispers that they make blood offerings to the White Shadows, or that they've learned how to tame whites to do their bidding. Sam's stomach twisted. Is that possible? For living men to control whites? Maura shook her head. Possible or not, the tales spread fear. Men will believe anything when winter grows long. She glanced at her bone necklace. But we saw footprints in the snow, lined up in neat rows, heading north. Whites don't usually move that way, not in perfect lines. Something guided them. Maybe it's the White Walkers themselves, or maybe it's these rumored worshippers. I can't say. Sam thought of Bowen's Raven, which mentioned a rumored clan that could speak in the voices of the dead. Everything pointed to a dark convergence in the far north. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Thank you, he said softly. I'll share this with my men. If you learn anything else from your people, tell me. She nodded. We will. We want to survive this. Word of Maura's information spread quickly among the watch. Men exchanged uneasy glances in the hall and sharpened their dragonglass weapons with greater urgency. Was it truly possible that a group of living humans had allied with the others? Or was it just superstition, confusion in the face of terror? Sam knew some of the free folk once worshipped the cold gods, but actual cooperation with White Walkers seemed a step too far. Then again, fear and desperation could push people toward madness. He decided to send another raven to Hardhome, warning Bowen of these rumors and urging vigilance. As he composed the letter, he found his hand trembling slightly. He forced himself to steady it. With each day, it seemed the threat became more layered, more insidious. They were not merely defending a static line against an undead army. They were navigating a shifting tapestry of fear, myth, and alliances, some of which might be more dangerous than the others themselves. 2 days later, a raven arrived from Hardhome in response to Sam's warnings and inquiries. Bowen confirmed no immediate sightings of such a cult or clan near the coast, but mentioned more refugees trickling in from the interior. Many spoke of entire villages gone silent overnight. Some insisted that the others were marching in small bands, capturing or converting the living one pocket at a time. Bowen reported that morale remained fragile, especially as rumors of the monstrous sea creature persisted. They had glimpsed large shapes breaching the waves at night, accompanied by unsettling howls that carried over the water. Sam shared the news with Dolorous Ed and a few officers in Greenwood Keep's dim great hall that evening, the flicker of torchlight dancing across their tense faces. If they're taking entire villages, Sam said, we can't wait for them to mass an army at our doorstep. But we also can't send men randomly into the wild. We'll end up lost or surrounded. Ed rubbed his chin. Hardhome's got a handle on its own region for the moment, at least. This rumor of a cult operating in the far north, that might be worse if it's true, could be they're trying to find ways to gather more whites or harness the White Walkers' power. Suppose we went north ourselves. The men exchanged apprehensive looks. Sam took a moment before speaking. We'd need a strong force, or we'd risk being picked off. We also need Greenwood Keep held in our absence. If I lead a band north, that leaves Ed in charge here, but our numbers are already thin. Could we muster enough men for a viable expedition? We might combine forces with Malra's wildlings, offered one of the rangers. They know the land better. Sam considered that. Malra's people are exhausted, but they might guide us to other free folk allies on the way. If we gather enough supporters, we might at least scout the area. If we find no sign of a cult, we turn back. If we do find something... He let his words trail off into the flicker of torchlight. He shrugged. I'm all for staying behind. My arm's about as useful as a wooden spoon in a sword fight, and I can keep the keep. But you're sure you want to risk it, Sam? Sam pressed his lips together. He thought of all the times men had hesitated, hoping the threat would resolve itself, only to face a far worse horror later. I think, yes, the others are not content to remain in the shadows forever. If a group of humans is assisting them, that complicates everything. I'd rather face that threat on our terms than wait for them to gather strength. He scanned the gathered men, rangers who had fought whites and lived, stewards who had saved lives under dire conditions. They were a hardened lot, if not numerous. Let's see how many volunteers we can get. I'll take maybe 20 or so. Malra's clan can provide some scouts. We'll leave enough men here under Ed's command to defend the keep. That's my decision. No one argued. The men's faces showed trepidation, but also grim acceptance. They were the Night's Watch after all. This was what they did. Over the next few days, Sam made preparations for the northern expedition. He selected volunteers, rangers like Oren, who had landed the blow that helped kill the White Walker, and Jaren, the skilled young archer. The blacksmith intensified his efforts, creating more arrowheads and spear tips. Malra, once she understood Sam's intent, agreed to send at least a handful of her stronger warriors as guides, though she would remain behind with the rest of her clan. I've lost too many already, she said quietly, but I will not stop those who wish to fight. Supplies were gathered: dried meats, hard biscuits, furs, torches, oil, rope, and a small forging kit for field repairs. Sam also designated a supply of the newly carved obsidian weapons. It struck him how different he felt now compared to the timid boy who had arrived at the wall so many years ago. Then he would have dreaded leaving the safety of any stronghold. Now his sense of responsibility outweighed his fear. He did not wish to die in the frozen wastes, but if facing that danger could save lives, he would shoulder the burden. On the morning of departure, Sam walked the courtyard, exchanging final words with men staying behind. He clasped Dolorous Ed's good hand. Ed stared at him a moment, the lines on his face drawn into a worried scowl. You come back alive, Sam, Ed said. I'm not made for lordship. I'd lose the rest of my hair in a fortnight. Sam almost laughed. You'll manage, he teased gently, then grew sober. Keep the men safe. Let me know if anything arises, if Harholm calls for help or if the others attack. I trust your judgment. Ed grunted. That's your first mistake, but I'll do what I must. They parted. Sam counted the men in his expedition, 23 in total, including 6 from Malra's wildlings. They carried spears, bows, swords, and a few small round shields. Each had a pouch of dragonlass arrowheads. Sam felt a chill wind scouring his cheeks as he mounted a sturdy Garen. He was not the best rider, but traveling on horseback would speed their initial journey. Soon enough, though, the terrain might force them to continue on foot. The gates opened, revealing the quiet forest. Sam signaled and they rode forth, hearing the gates clatter shut behind them. Greenwood Keep's newly rebuilt ramparts looked stoic, defiant against the winter gloom. Sam whispered a small prayer that it would hold until they returned. They traveled northwest at first, following a ranger's memory of old game trails, then curved northward once the forest thickened. Each day, the sun rose weakly, offering only a few hours of pale light before dipping below the horizon. Nights were long, lit by moon or starlight when the clouds parted. The cold intensified, and the men huddled around small fires in sheltered groves, always wary of drawing too much attention. Sam ordered strict watch rotations for men awake at all times, scanning the darkness for any flicker of movement. On the third night, they encountered a group of wildlings around a flickering fire. At first, tension flared, weapons were drawn, but Malra's scouts recognized one of the men. Handshakes and tight-lipped greetings followed. These wildlings, it turned out, were from a clan called the Night Runners. They had recently been attacked by whites, losing half their number. The survivors looked at Sam's black cloak with cautious hope when they learned he had dragaglass weapons. Sam asked them for news from the north. A grizzled man with scarred cheeks spat into the snow. We've heard the same talk, some new clan or cult deep in the high passes beyond the Frostfangs. They call them the Iceborn. Some say they're half-white walker themselves, cursed with pale skin and hearts of ice. Could be children's tales, or could be they truly exist. All I know is that the free folk up there vanish without a trace. The phrase Iceborn sent a skitter of unease through Sam. He pressed for details, but the wildlings knew little. They had been fleeing south, not heading north. They warned that heavy snows and treacherous cliffs would bar the way. Sam thanked them, offering a few strips of dried venison as a gesture of goodwill, and the groups parted ways in the morning. With each step north, the landscape grew harsher. The trees thinned, replaced by icy crags and windy plateaus. Hunting became difficult, few animals roamed here in deep winter. The expedition rationed their food carefully. Some days, they traversed valleys where the snow rose to the horses' bellies and men had to dismount and lead the poor beasts. Night temperatures plummeted to lethal lows, forcing them to build windbreaks of snow or huddle behind boulders to avoid frostbite. Sam worried constantly that the men would lose toes or fingers. They pressed on only because they had no other choice. Occasionally, they found signs of life, footprints, old campfires, or a single abandoned hut carved into a rocky overhang. But always the signs were days old, perhaps weeks. The hush of this wilderness weighed on them. Tension built in every glance, every shift of the wind. At last, they reached a pass leading into the northern mountains, the Frostfangs looming overhead. The range was a jagged wall of white and gray, half lost in swirling cloud. Sam called a halt to assess. The wind buffeted them, tugging at their cloaks. He raised his voice to be heard. We're near the edge of known territory. If the rumors are true, we might find these Iceborn, if that's what they are, beyond these peaks. We have a choice. Go forward or turn back and report what we've learned. Oren, the ranger who had once speared the White Walker, squared his shoulders. We came this far. If there's truly a threat here, we can't just leave it. I say we push on a bit more, see if we can confirm anything. A chorus of murmurs followed. Jaren, the young archer, nodded. I'm not about to quit. If we do, we'll just be waiting for them to come to us. Sam looked around at the faces. Exhaustion etched every line, but they still had fight in them. Very well, Sam said, raising his voice. We go on. But cautiously. We climb the pass, keep an eye out for any vantage point that might hide watchers. Be prepared to encounter whites or worse. They ascended into the mountains, leading the horses on narrow switchbacks. At times, they had to pause and hack away at ice or snow blocking the path. The wind howled more fiercely, carrying bits of ice that stung exposed skin. The men's beards gathered frost until they looked like old men from legend. Sam's breath came in ragged gasps at the altitude and his fingers grew numb despite gloves. Yet they pressed on. By late afternoon of the second day in the pass, they crested a ridge and looked down into a wide valley beyond. The sun was already dipping behind the mountains, casting elongated shadows. In the dimness, they saw what appeared to be smoke rising from somewhere within the valley. A settlement? Or a camp? Could be them, muttered one of Maura's scouts, a wiry woman named Ressa. Or it could be another clan. Sam narrowed his eyes. We should approach quietly. Leave the horses behind if it's too steep or if the risk is high. We don't want to announce ourselves. They found a sheltered overhang to leave the horses, tethering them so they wouldn't wander. Then, with weapons drawn and caution guiding their steps, the group crept down the slope toward the valley. The smoke grew more evident, a thin column rising into the twilight. Snow crunched underfoot, each step seeming deafening in the hush. Sam's heart pounded, a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. As they neared, they saw a collection of structures, crude huts built of snow blocks and logs. The architecture reminded Sam of older free folk dwellings. In the center of the settlement stood a tall totem carved from ice, shimmering faintly in the dying light. Symbols etched into its surface were unlike anything Sam recognized. Something about the shapes made his skin crawl as though they carried a resonance of the unnatural. Figures moved among the huts, some cloaked in pale fur. The watchers concealed themselves behind a drift, observing. Sam counted maybe 24 visible forms, but there could be more hidden inside. A few near the totem wore masks of bone or ice, shaped vaguely like snarling beasts. The atmosphere was eerie, almost ritualistic. Sam's pulse quickened. Could these be the rumored Iceborn, or some clan allied with the others? They watched as one of the masked figures approached the totem, raising a hand as if in supplication. A keening chant floated on the wind, too faint to decipher. Another figure, clad in rag. Get White dragged something across the snow, a carcass? Sam strained to see. When the figure reached the totem, it hoisted the limp shape onto a stone slab. Firelight flickered, revealing it to be a wolf or dog, possibly freshly killed. A sacrifice of some sort? Jaren, crouched beside Sam, swallowed hard. Gods, he whispered. What are they doing? Sam shook his head, heart hammering. Whatever it is, it doesn't look good. He took a breath, trying to think rationally. We need to see if they're truly connected to the White Walkers or just worshipping something. Let's wait and watch for a bit longer. Then decide. They remained crouched in the snow, muscles cramping from the cold. The twilight deepened and the chanting grew louder. The robed figures lit small braziers around the totem, the flames casting dancing shadows across the ice carving. The design on the totem almost appeared to shift in the firelight as though alive. Suddenly, a shout rose among the watchers. One of the masked figures pointed toward the slope. Sam's blood turned to ice. Had they been spotted? The watchers pressed themselves lower. Another shout. Figures rushed to the edge of the settlement, peering into the darkness. A hush followed, and then the chanting resumed, louder, more urgent. Whatever suspicion they'd had seemed to pass, but Sam's heart refused to slow. That was too close, Oren muttered. They're on edge. Sam nodded. We might not get another chance to observe. Either we leave now and return with more men, or we attempt contact or infiltration. If they truly serve the others, we need to know. I'll go closer, offered Ressa, Malra's scout. I can circle around, see if there's another vantage. If I don't return in an hour, assume I've been caught. Sam hesitated. It was dangerous, but Ressa was skilled. All right? Be careful, he whispered. She slipped away, a dark shape against the snow, moving with surprising stealth. The others hunkered down, trying to stay silent. The chanting rose and fell in waves. At times, it sounded almost like the howling of wind through a gorge, at other times like human voices distorted by pain or ecstasy. Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. His mind drifted to the old texts describing the long night, how some humans had turned to worship the others in exchange for survival, only to discover the price was their own humanity. Time passed sluggishly. Sam shifted to keep his toes from freezing. At last, Ressa returned, sliding beside him with labored breaths. I found a side path that leads behind the settlement, she whispered. They have a pit or dungeon of some sort carved into the ice. I heard moans from within. Could be prisoners. Saw a couple more huts, maybe more people. Hard to count, but I did see something else. A figure dressed in black rags, tall, with skin like pale ice. Not quite a White Walker, but near enough to make my skin crawl. Sam's throat went dry. So they're consorting with the others? Ressa glanced at him. Or they have one among them. It didn't move like a mindless wight. It seemed, aware, walking with purpose, guarded by two of those masked folk. A cold certainty settled over Sam. Then we found them. The question is what we do now. We can't take them by force with only 20-odd men. Not if there's truly an other there, plus these worshippers. We should retreat, gather reinforcements. But retreating meant giving these cultists time to strengthen or to vanish deeper into the north. Could Sam risk letting them slip away? He wrestled with indecision. Oren cleared his throat. If we kill that other, maybe the rest of them lose heart. They might just be normal people deluded by fear and superstition. Yes, or maybe they have a small army of whites hidden, Sam said quietly. We know how dangerous a single White Walker can be. One nearly killed half our party before we brought it down. And these people might fight us too. We'd be outnumbered. Another hush fell. The chanting continued unabated. Jaren offered we could try a diversion. Set a fire in one part of the camp, draw them away, then strike the other. But that's a guess. We don't know the layout well enough. Sam racked his mind for a solution. They lacked the element of surprise if they tried a frontal assault. They also lacked a solid vantage point to pick off the White Walker from a safe distance. Risking an infiltration might lead to a slaughter. Yet doing nothing seemed unconscionable. If these worshippers had allied with an other, if they were performing sacrifices, capturing prisoners, or forging some new dark power, the threat to everything south would be immense. At last, Sam decided. We'll observe a little longer, perhaps until near dawn, if we can stand the cold. If we see an opening for a quick strike or rescue, we take it. Otherwise, we mark this location and return to Greenwood Keep. We'll gather more men, possibly coordinate with Harhome. There's no victory in charging blindly to our deaths. The men nodded, though some war frustration on their faces. They settled in for a long vigil. The temperature plummeted further, and the watchers took turns letting each other huddle under blankets to stave off frostbite. Sam forced himself to remain awake, though his eyelids grew heavy, his breathing shallow in the thin air. Each time he drifted, the memory of that White Walker's face jolted him back to alertness. The chanting continued until near midnight when it tapered off. Figures moved among the huts, some going inside, others milling about the totem as if on guard. The masked ones vanished into the largest hut from which a faint glow leaked through cracks. No one else emerged who looked remotely like a White Walker. When at last the sky began to lighten with the false dawn, Sam signaled the men to withdraw. Their limbs were stiff and it took all their discipline to move quietly up the slope. They retrieved their horses, relieved to find them alive and unharmed. Then they set off down the pass, every sense on high alert for pursuit. None came. It seemed the cultists were either unaware of them or unconcerned. They camped that evening in a sheltered nook several miles south of the pass. Only then did Sam let himself exhale. The men built a small fire, carefully shielding it so the light wouldn't carry far. As they thawed their limbs, Sam gathered them to speak. "We've confirmed the presence of an other in that settlement. We suspect these people worship or serve it. That alone is reason enough for alarm." Jaren shook his head. "I've never heard of living men and White Walkers side by side. It's unnatural." Sam ran a hand over his face. "It is. But in times of desperation, men do monstrous things. We'll return to Greenwood Keep, share what we've seen. Then we can plan. Perhaps we'll request Hardhome's help. I won't risk a direct assault with so few men." No one argued. Exhaustion weighed on them, and the knowledge that they had barely scratched the surface of what horrors might lurk in those mountains made them eager to leave. They slept fitfully, setting double watches, but no enemies appeared. The journey back was no less grueling, though at least they traveled with gravity drawing them southward. The frigid air seemed to recede, bit by bit, as they descended from the high passes. When at last they reached denser forest, the men found themselves breathing easier, though they still had a wary eye on every shifting shadow. On the 10th day after leaving Greenwood Keep, they neared its outskirts. Sam's chest tightened with a combination of relief and trepidation. He dreaded what might have transpired in their absence. Their approach was greeted by watchmen atop the keep's walls, who let out a shout of recognition. The gates swung open, revealing Dolores Ed in the courtyard, wearing a heavy cloak. Ed ambled over, his expression betraying anxiety and relief. "Welcome back," he said. "We weren't sure you'd return at all, to be honest. I have a nice bottle of sour ale to celebrate. Or to drown sorrows, whichever is more fitting." Sam, weary to the bone, nearly stumbled off his horse. Ed supported him. The men behind Sam filtered in, leading their horses to the makeshift stable. "Has the keep been all right?" Sam asked, scanning the courtyard. "Fine enough," Ed replied. "No major attacks, though we had a scare from a white moose that wandered too close. The archers brought it down. We heard from Hardhome too. Bowen says things remain the same, no big changes. But I suspect you have stories of your own." Sam nodded grimly. "More than you might want to hear. Let's gather in the hall. We have urgent matters to discuss." He recounted the journey to Ed and the senior rangers while they shared a simple meal at a long wooden table. Torchlight flickered over plates of salt fish and black bread. Sam explained the settlement, the totem, the chanting, the presence of an other among them. When he finished, a hush fell. Ed's usually sardonic features were etched with genuine worry. "So there really are men who serve the White Walkers," Ed muttered. "Iceborne cult or whatever they call themselves. This is new. We always assumed the others enslaved the dead, but living allies? That's a fresh nightmare." One of the rangers who had stayed behind, a grizzled man named Harfell, rubbed his stubbled chin. "We'd need a large force to assault a fortified settlement in that terrain. Even if they're not many in number, they've got the advantage of that pass and another." "Agreed," Sam said. "We might coordinate with Hardhome, see if Bowen can spare a contingent. Perhaps we can also rally some free folk from Malra's clan or others who might prefer fighting the dead over joining them." Ed gave a half-smile. "So we're building an army, are we?" Sam sighed. "An army might be too grand a term, but enough to tip the scales. If the others have begun forging alliances with the living, we can't allow that to take root. Otherwise, it could spread." "You're right, of course. We can send a raven to Hardhome straight away," Ed said, pushing aside his empty plate. "I'll pen it myself, if you like, or you can. But first, you should rest, Sam. You look about ready to topple over." Despite his exhaustion, Sam felt the restless churn of urgency in his gut. But Ed was right. Pushing himself beyond his limits would help no one. He nodded wearily. "Yes. First rest, then letters. We'll talk more on the morrow." He rose from the table, ignoring the stiffness in his legs and the throbbing ache in his back. As he made his way to his chamber, men called quiet greetings of welcome back, some patting him on the shoulder in relief. Sam mustered a polite nod each time, though his mind was miles away in that cold valley with the flickering braziers and the carved ice totem. He climbed the tower stairs, passing the library door. A flicker of candlelight within reminded him that he still had research to do. But for once he turned away, letting the lure of a bed drive him on. He pushed open the door to his chamber, stepping into the dimness. The shutters were closed, blocking the worst of the draft. A small brazier offered a feeble glow. Sam removed his cloak, boots, and gloves, nearly groaning as he stretched out the soreness in his spine. Despite the swirl of thoughts, fatigue claimed him quickly when he lay down on the straw mattress. Dreams came almost immediately, but they were mercifully soft at first, images of warm days in Old Town, of strolling with Gilly near the docks, of baby Sam laughing. Then the warmth shifted. The dream twisted. He was in the library of Castle Black, a place he once cherished. Except every book he touched turned to ice in his hands. The cold spread up his arms. He tried to call for help, but no sound came. The library walls seemed to tower, and a voice whispered from the shadows, "You cannot hold back the night, Samwell Tarley." He turned to see a shape formed of swirling snow, eyes glinting pale blue. He reached for a dragon-glass dagger at his belt, but it crumbled. Fear squeezed his chest. He woke in a gasp, the brazier's dying embers his only companion. The dream left him shaken, heart hammering in the gloom. Morning found Sam no more rested than before, but he rose nonetheless. Duty beckoned. He trudged down to the courtyard where a fresh layer of snow had fallen overnight. The men were stirring, some already seeing to their tasks. He found Dolores Ed speaking with a group of watchmen. When Ed spotted him, he motioned Sam over. "We were just discussing building more permanent fortifications," Ed said. "If we're to be an outpost for a larger force, we'll need better defenses, proper palisades, a stronger gate, maybe even a curtain wall if we can manage it. The men are willing, though we're short on lumber unless we harvest more from the forest." Sam nodded, pondering. "We can send woodcutters out under heavy guard. It'll take time, but it's necessary. Greenwood Keep might become the central stronghold for the fight in this area." Ed's eyes flicked to Sam's face, noticing the dark rings under his eyes. "You all right?" "Just a bad dream," Sam murmured, turning to the men. "Let's see what we can plan for the fortifications. Then we'll send that raven to Har home about forming a joint force. We might also want to contact any free folk allies we have left. Maura's clan can probably reach out to others. We'll need every sword. Or spear," it said. "Or bow. Or rock, for that matter." A slight smile touched Sam's lips. They spent the next hour walking the perimeter, pointing out sections of the wall that could be reinforced with fresh timber, discussing the possibility of building a small tower on the southwestern corner for better vantage. Ed jotted notes on a scrap of parchment. Despite the never-ending cold, Sam felt a spark of determination. They were not cowering behind the wall, hoping for rescue. They were forging the watch anew, taking the fight to the enemy, preparing for the worst the others could unleash. When they finished, Sam climbed to the rookery. A raven sat on its perch, blinking at him with beady black eyes. He composed another letter to Bowen Fletch, detailing everything about the northern settlement, the possibility of an allied White Walker, the grim ritual they had witnessed. He requested that Bowen muster wildling support and perhaps send a detachment of able fighters to Greenwood Keep if Har home could spare them. It was a big ask, but time was short. He sealed the letter, attached it to the raven's leg, and watched it soar into the white sky. Days passed in a flurry of hard work. Men cut timber under watchful guard, hauling logs back to the keep on sledges. The blacksmith hammered out brackets and nails despite the cold that made metal brittle. Maura's people assisted, though many of them had limited strength from hunger and exhaustion. In return, the stewards shared what food they had. Sam worried the stores might run dangerously low if new supplies did not arrive, but he saw no alternative. Denying the free folk food would weaken their will to resist the dead. Meanwhile, Sam pored over the small library, searching for any reference to cults that had once served the others. Daniel assisted, though the lad struggled with some of the older texts. They found scattered references, mostly from the Age of Heroes, to ice priests who supposedly bargained with dark powers. One mention described them as pale shadows given form, but it offered no details about how they functioned or how they might be defeated. Sam wanted more concrete knowledge, some kind of key that would let them disrupt the others' influence beyond simply stabbing them with dragaglass. One night, a courier arrived on horseback from a wildling band that roamed near the Miltwater. The man panted and clutched his side as if he had ridden hard and fast. He demanded to speak with Sam. The watchers escorted him into the keep's great hall where Sam awaited by the fire. "Lord Commander," the man said, voice shaking. "I bring tidings from the High Pass. We saw a group of masked folk traveling south, leading whites on chains. They were heading this way, perhaps still a few days' travel off." A jolt of alarm shot through Sam. "Are you certain?" The courier nodded, face pale. I saw it with my own eyes. The whites moved in eerie unison as if enthralled. The masked ones walked among them like shepherds guiding sheep. We didn't stay to see more, we fled. How many were there? Hard to count. Perhaps a dozen masked, maybe 40 whites. But there could be more behind them. The man swallowed. I rode as fast as I could, stopping only to trade horses with a friendly clan. They'll be coming, my lord. Sam thanked him, offered him rest and a hot meal, then gathered Ed and the rangers. The news was dire. If these cultists were moving south with whites under their command, Greenwood Keep might be the target, or they might be heading for Harholm. Either way, the watch had no time to spare. That's not a large force, but if they truly control the whites, Oren said, that's something we've never faced. Usually whites are guided by a White Walker directly. They could be leading them in the White Walker's stead, Ed muttered, like lieutenants. Sam's mind whirled with possibilities. This might confirm that they've found a way to bind whites. If so, that knowledge is more dangerous than any one White Walker. They could create pockets of undead anywhere. We have to prepare. They might come here first to test our defenses. Ed set his jaw. We'll do more than prepare. We'll load the walls with archers, dragonglass arrows, pitch for fire. Those whites might be on chains, but they'll still die to flame.